So having completed the module as regards handing up my project and things like that, I just want to have a quick run through of what I've learned and about from the module and things like that. So only had very little experience really with gears or anything like that prior to this module. Maybe a small bit from DCG already in secondary school, but that's about it. So it was new territory for me and I didn't really know where to go or where to begin. So a lot of thinking and researching had to be done. So the first thing I did is I started with the brief analysis. So I looked into things like Menlo Park and Thomas Edison, as they were very dominant in the actual brief, and I had to look into dynamic thinking. With that then, I had to look, dynamic thinking is just constant movement basically, and I wanted to have movement obviously in my project, but that was part of the brief. And I wanted to represent this constant movement by something that was always changing or adapting, like our minds, and that's what I wanted to achieve in the award. Then my initial sketches I had, because Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, I wanted to include this into my project, and as you can see here are some of my initial design sketches, like trophy styles including gears and things like that, which were on display. Now I then created my prototype, which initially was wall mounted award with a lampshade on top and reciprocating gears in the middle and the front, which moved up and down to hit a switch. I wasn't very happy with this initial prototype and I decided to collaborate with some others in the class to try and improve the idea. I spoke to Adrian as well, and what I got from it really is that this would be a very difficult project to execute correctly, and there was a lot of work involved in it, and it was a large project as well because of the thickness of it and the size. So this collaboration actually led to a complete change, which was probably the best for me. I moved on to some new ideas, and as you can see here, in order to represent dynamic thinking, I personally felt I would like the outline of a head containing gears, as was the project I wanted to do, and the secondary function of this then would be a lampshade. In these sketches, as you can see, I have a secondary function of a lampshade. I have the head with the gears for dynamic thinking, the base which I got from the idea from a cup I had at home, and this would house the motor then, and you can see an initial sketch in the bottom left which represents roughly what I wanted to create. So the revised idea then is basically just I created a prototype out of cardboard and coloured paper, and this was an idea that I wished to create. Moving on then, a big part of the project was material selection, and there was a lot of choices to be made here. I had the choice of MDF or acrylic. So with acrylic then I decided that the gears would be acrylic. I felt that they'd be more smooth, lightweight, more durable as well, and waterproof and long lasting if needed to be, rather than the MDF, and they could be made any size you want. A limitation with the MDF then is that if it was being CNC'd on the router, that it would have to be the smallest diameter of the drill bit could be 6mm, which was too large for what I wanted for my project. However, I could the MDF for the outline of my head to give structure and allow to achieve a good finish with the paint. As you can see here, a problem that I encountered was that with material selection, I initially had a dowel shaft, a awful lot of friction, so I moved on to the threaded bar, and that allowed then to be more durable and long lasting, and also involved less torque or pressure on the actual motor itself. And as you can see, this is the outline of the head that I've chosen, and that then was good for the structure and allowed good stability for the shafts that I spoke about. In relation to time efficiency then, initially I didn't actually create any Gantt chart or any time frame for me to work within, but having looked back on it now, I should have. I did plan, however, on what I was going to do in every lab. I wrote down a list and tried to tick them off as I went through, and to be as time efficient as possible. Coming to the end, it was a little more pressured, but thankfully everything was completed in time and we got it handed in. So as for the innovation part of things, I wanted to have a secondary function of the award, especially if it was going to be a mantelpiece object. I wanted it to look well. So how I did this then is I thought of including a lampshade so that it would bring light to the room. As you can see in the front of my project, I decided to paint on the outline of a tree branch, and the shade itself then is actually trees. What I wanted to portray here or represent basically was the tree of knowledge, and that the dynamic thinking in the brain helps to contribute to the tree of knowledge that one would have. When it came to evidence of investigation then, I readdressed my original analysis of brief, and I started looking into things like Thomas Edison and his inventions, and the main inventions that I found that were contributing to my project were the light and the battery, because the two of them were going to be incorporated in my project. The light, which was going to be inside the lampshade of course, and the battery then, which would have been running the motor of my project. So here's further ideas I had initially. The lampshade, I was thinking of bending it in acrylic and strip heating designs into it like the butterflies there, or something along those lines. However, I found that wouldn't be very suitable. Having spoken to Seamus Harland, he decided against it, as there would be an awful lot of curves and bend marks left in the project. With the reciprocating gears then, I wanted to include them in my project. However, due to the small teeth that were involved in it, it's one thing I would have changed. I would have made the teeth bigger, but it was very difficult to get them meshing correctly, so I removed them from the project. As you can see here, dynamic basically means non-linear thinking, so I wanted to include something quirky into my design. With the working drawings then, they gave me guidance and a point of reference. I did a number of working drawings of all the parts in the project, and this helped me to eliminate any issues, and also highlighted problem areas that I would encounter throughout the making of this project, and I could solve them prior to encountering them in the making of the project, let's say. The drawing of the motor was very helpful. That way then I could decide on the size of my base, and I also got the size of a battery holder, which was key because the battery holder and the motor is what would have been housed in the base, and I wanted to ensure that I had enough space in there to house the two of them. The working drawings also helped me to get an idea of what my final project would look like, and then once I had it in my head, I knew where I was going and what I wanted to achieve. It also helped me to get some critical dimensions. As you can see here, I have the 37mm, which is a critical dimension to make sure that my small gears in the front of the award were meshed correctly and rotate, and thankfully they did. Expression and emotion then, I used the colour chart and I addressed that to try and get gold, and I wanted gold then to highlight the fact that it was an award, and the contemporary purple then was to complement it and express fresh ideas and dynamic thinking. The gold then was basically to create an emotional attachment to the award, and I also did that by putting my own name on the award with the little plaque on the front that was laser cut out. There was a lot of problem solving that went on throughout the completion of this project, and one of these was that an issue I encountered was the angle I had on some of the gears to each other was very tight at the back of the head, and this caused an awful lot of friction then, and actually caused the motor to stop. To resolve this then, I moved the centres of some of the gears, and this allowed them to mesh correctly, and a much more smooth gear chain was created. Another issue I encountered is that the main gear at the bottom of the motor was slipping on the shaft. So in order to resolve this, I threaded the shaft bar, which was actually quite difficult due to its small size, and then I placed a nut on the inside, applied the gear and made sure it was straight, and I glued the gear onto it. And then on the outside of the gear again, I applied another nut and glued that to ensure that it wouldn't move or it wouldn't come loose on the shaft. So here we have a few pictures of my final project. As you can see, the colour scheme was white, gold and purple, and it had a gear train at the back which transmitted the power from the motor in the base up to the gears on the front of the award. So what I've learned from this module is collaboration, and that it is important to collaborate with your classmates, the teachers, the TAs and so on. And the collaboration then helps your ideas to evolve. So sharing of ideas and resources, problem solving and thinking on your feet, contribution to my teaching. So I hope that what I've learned in this module I can transmit across to my teaching and contribute to my pupils' experience, and communication in ICT as well. The ICT involved in this, let's say through Edmodo, was very helpful for people to communicate their ideas, help others, and also get feedback based on what you have designed and things like that.